Shout out to my best friend who is the only person I know who still loves Shia LaBeouf as much as she did when he was on Even Stevens. Hey, I'm Amy and welcome back. Today I am talking about Shia LaBeouf's new film, Borg vs. McEnroe. It is about the tennis championship from, I think, the early 1980s, late 1970s. I don't know. I honestly know nothing about tennis or this important match or either of these two players, but I am interested to see what Shia LaBeouf is like in this because I saw him on Jimmy Kimmel a couple nights ago and they were like, this movie's really great, and I haven't seen something with Shia LaBeouf in it that has looked interesting. I've seen trailers for this a long time ago because I think it premiered at Sundance? I'm not 100% sure, but I know I've heard a lot about this movie and I was very interested in seeing it. The only thing about it though is it was very hard to find in a theater, even in Los Angeles. Like, I looked it up on like Fandango and I just looked up the movie in general and there was only one theater that was playing it and it was like an hour drive away from me in traffic and I wasn't about to do that, plus pay like $20 for a ticket. So I was like, sorry, maybe not gonna review this, but it is a day and date release, which means the day it comes out in theaters, it is also available on digital. So I scoured the internet to find this. Every time I googled it, it came up on Amazon UK, iTunes UK, like pretty much any digital rental platform, but in the UK because it is a UK film. It was produced, I believe it was produced by some UK distributors or production houses, and the website even for the film took me to UK distributors or UK rental places. So I finally just gave up and I was like, maybe I won't find it, but after I ended up searching Amazon in general and iTunes, both of them gave me a way to rent this movie on their digital platforms, which I was very thankful for because I was like, am I gonna have to fake my location? Because I tried to rent it through the UK and it wouldn't let me. So I had a very fun adventure trying to find this film, but I found it in the end and I wanted to talk about it with all of you guys. So if you do not know what Born vs. If you don't know what Björn vs. McEnroe is about, it's basically the lead up to and final Wimbledon match between Björn Borg and John McEnroe in the 70s or 80s, again, not completely sure. And the reason this match was so big was because at this time in history, tennis was huge. So Wimbledon was basically like the Super Bowl. Everyone was like obsessed with tennis stars, and Bjorn Borg had won 4 times in a row already. And John McEnroe was slated to defeat him, dethrone him. And this is kind of the lead up to their whole final thing, and it really goes into the backstory of both of these competitors. It more so focuses on Borg instead of focusing on McEnroe, which I kind of thought it would, considering the trailer that I had watched was very more focused on Shia LaBeouf's character of McEnroe, because I think he's more of a known name than the actor who plays Borg. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name because it is a very difficult sounding looking Swedish name, and I know I will butcher it. So I will stay away from that. But Shia LaBeouf has been the one that's been going on press tours and interviews, not even Stellan Skarsgård, who is still a pretty well-known name in the industry, hasn't been going on as many talk shows or anything, at least in the US. So I thought it would be more focused on McEnroe. But anyways, this really goes into the backstory and kind of childhood almost of both Borg and McEnroe and kind of how both of them became the tennis players that they are. To me, it felt very much like I, Tonya, just a slight bit. I don't know if that's just because it is from Neon, who also produced I, Tonya, or the fact that it is also a sports biopic with some flashbacks to the childhood of the main characters. I guess it doesn't really have the complete same feel as I, Tonya, because I, Tonya really does go into different sides of the story, which this one does, but in a different way because it is showing just two completely different people and two completely different stories, whereas I, Tonya is showing the same story, just two different sides of it. I, Tonya really does have more of a documentary feel as well, versus this one, it does feel very more like a biopic. That's kind of where the two are different, but the way it was color graded, the camera, the cinematography of it is very similar to I, Tonya. I do love how they symbolize, and at least in the introductions for each character, for each tennis player, they showed the difference in a very stark contrast between the two. Björn is very quiet, kind of tries to keep to himself, so they used very quiet music, very muted tones, and it's just very, like, this ecosystem around him and his scenes is completely different from the way they show McEnroe. It's like very rock music, very loud, very bright, because that is kind of how he portrayed himself. McEnroe was a very loud and brash and vulgar character, I guess is the best way to put it. That is what he was known for. He just did not care about anything. Or, well, he cared very much about tennis and very much about winning, but he just didn't care how other people thought of him. There is a storyline or bits and pieces of a storyline throughout McEnroe's storyline where he very much wants people to focus on his tennis playing and talk about the aspect of it or the tennis aspect in any of his interviews or press briefings, and they all really want to focus more on his language, how he plays tennis, like not how he plays tennis, but just him yelling with the umpire / refs, I don't really know what they're called, and more focusing on the rivalry between McEnroe and Björn. Whereas everyone just really, really wants to talk to Björn, nobody really cares about his feelings, and everyone is just rushing him. He is like this god among men. Everyone wants to see him, wants to talk to him, wants to get a signature, get a photo with him, but he's also this very quiet and conserved person who wants nobody to talk to him, doesn't really want people to know who he is. Like at one point in the movie, he puts a cap on, people still recognize him, and then at one point he goes into a bar thinking that the bartender doesn't recognize him, but I think the bartender does, but just doesn't say it because he really understands that Björn doesn't want to be recognized. He just pretends to be somebody completely different. You really get the feeling that he just doesn't want to be in the spotlight anymore. Like I said, this film really goes back, kind of like I, Tonya does, and shows the progression, the childhood through flashbacks of both of these tennis stars. They show how Björn was the complete opposite of what he is now. He wasn't the quiet, reserved player that you see in matches. He used to be very much like McEnroe, but with the help of his coach, who's played by Stellan Skarsgård, he becomes this quiet, reserved person because that is how he wins his matches. He puts all the anger and aggression that he had into each and every swing and hit and movement on the court. McEnroe is just, he was this very quiet, reserved little boy who was very smart and had a bright future and was very pressured by both of his parents to become this very smart person, but instead becomes this really loud, brash, aggressive tennis player who becomes famous and the center of attention for being that. You really get to see McEnroe's progression from this very shy, quiet kid to this loud, brash character, then to finally in the last match being very much more reserved like Björn, to play his best and to put all of that anger. You see him physically holding back his anger in this final Wimbledon match, and it kind of helps him win in the end, even though very loose spoiler alert, because this is a historical event and everyone probably besides myself knows what happens in this event. He loses to Björn winning his 5th Wimbledon title. I don't know how true it is, but I really liked the opposites of the way that Björn and McEnroe kind of grew up from being the opposite of what they are in matches today, in like present time, because this is like 30-40 years ago, to what they were, and I thought that was a really well done thing, if that makes any sense. The last thing I do want to talk about is the cast. The cast was really, really great. They weren't like superb, outstanding, like award-winning performances, but compared to some biopic films, they were pretty decently good. Stellan Skarsgård wasn't much different than what I've seen him in some things where he's not like acting his heart out. He's just kind of playing Stellan Skarsgård, but he did have a really great monologue where he's kind of coaching Björn to be his best when he's a teenager right before his first big match. But the actor who played Björn, again, not going to attempt to pronounce his very difficult looking Swedish name, was so great. He just really played the stoic silence of Björn very well, and you could see him just holding back the anger and aggression that he has been pushing down in himself for the last 10 years, holding it back in until he gets onto the court and just lets out all of his aggression. But you also really get that very OCD within him where he has to make everything perfect and right. So he was just so great. He probably was the standout to me, especially since he was probably the lead. I think, yeah, I feel like he'd be more of the lead on this than, say, like a co-lead with Shia, because I feel like they did focus more on him, and for a good reason. He just did such a phenomenal, outstanding job. While Shia LaBeouf was a little bit more on the back burner. He really just, I don't know, I felt like I was watching a Shia LaBeouf performance when he was in more of his dramatic roles when he was on the Disney Channel, although I don't think that's really saying much for me because I haven't really seen him in anything else since the Disney Channel, except for those weird like art experiments that he's been doing recently and all of the weird crazy stuff he's been getting into. But it's probably one of the best things I've seen him in since the Disney Channel, since Even Stevens, which was one of my favorite shows growing up. I could take him or leave him. If he does more stuff like this, where he's more calm and neutral, I'd be very interested to see that. But knowing what Shia LaBeouf has done in the past, I don't know if he will stick to things like this. It'll be interesting to see. My rewatch score for this is a little tough. It is definitely an artsy-fartsy film that I would probably add to my collection in the future, but it's not a movie that I probably would rent or rewatch again either, unless I really wanted to dig really deep down into some of the symbolism throughout the movie that I really didn't sit and focus on as much as I probably usually do with films like this. But I probably would give this an Amazon, not a Netflix because it's not on Netflix. It is actually an Amazon film, or you can rent it on Amazon right now. So I will give this an Amazon at the moment. Yeah, it's definitely an artsy-fartsy film, and I will probably be collecting a lot of what Neon distributes because I really do enjoy a lot of their films. So I would add this to my collection in the future, but a rewatchability is definitely a Netflix/Amazon. But those are all of my thoughts for Borg vs. McEnroe. If you have seen this, please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you know anything about this? Do you know how accurate this is to real life? And thank you guys so much for watching. I really, truly do appreciate every single one of you. Let me know who you are in the comments down below, and let's be friends. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and subscribe if you're new, because I love talking movies, TV shows, filmmaking, and film history with you all. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye!